Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Today we're starting day 2 of vision. So we're going to be looking at more of the perception of visual stimuli and less about the anatomy of the eye. So let's get on to it. So, kind of a review here. We talked about two ways of kind of organizing and perceiving our sensory information. We said that there's top down processing, in which you're kind of connecting to things that you're primed with in terms of like expectations, memories, previously held ideas, etc. And then there's bottom up processing, in which you're kind of just taking it at face value and not connecting it to things that you previously know and whatnot. So when we said the Ratman illusion, that is an example of top down processing, in that you were primed by either seeing a bunch of animals beforehand or seeing a bunch of human faces. And that's kind of coloring how you're perceiving that illusion. If you looked at the Ratman illusion without any of the animals or people's faces beforehand, then that would be more bottom up processing, because you're just kind of interpreting it for what it is at face value and not connecting it to other things. But we're going to add on this third way of organizing our sensory information, which we had already talked about at the very beginning of the course, which is Gestalt psychology. And we know that Gestalt is the one that says we look at meaningful wholes. So Gestalt is kind of, when we're talking about how it connects to processing sensory information, it's saying that we kind of do it automatically and unconsciously. Like we automatically process things to create meaningful wholes. So, a review, if you remember, I showed this video of Ferris Bueller's Day Off when he looks at that famous painting at the Art Institute called, I think it's called like Saturday in the Park or Saturday Afternoon. And we know that when you look at this, you just see the meaningful whole of this picture of a bunch of people having a lovely time at the park on a Saturday. And that's thanks to Gestalt psychology, in that it automatically organizes all those little dots into a meaningful whole. But we know that truly the painting is made up of a bunch of teeny, 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 tiny dots, not even brush strokes, it's all a bunch of dots. But Gestalt is the idea that we don't see those dots, we just automatically process that as a meaningful whole. So we're going to look at kind of different Gestalt principles, or kind of little tricks that our brain does, according to Gestalt psychology, to try and process things automatically to create those meaningful wholes. So here's some right here, but I'll go in more depth. You can kind of see some of these little tricks that our brain does. So the first trick our brain does is called proximity. And you see here that like we kind of do, a lot of these have to do with grouping and putting things together, right? So rather than seeing what it would be 2, 4, 6 lines, right? We kind of seeing them as like 3 groups, right? Like this is group, this is group, this is group. And that's proximity, right? We group things that are closer together. So again, it's kind of creating that meaningful whole. Rather seeing all these different lines, we see them as groups of these 2 lines together. So 3 groups of 2. Then similarity. So this is just the idea that we group things that are alike together, right? So we're not seeing this, like our brain kind of automatically sees it as like triangle, smiley, heart. Except it's not a smiley because it has no mouth, but whatever. Right? We don't see it as triangle, face, heart, because those are different, right? You kind of automatically, your brain's drawn to read this as triangle, face, heart, because those are similar. It's kind of grouping it in that way diagonally rather than horizontally. Then there's something called continuity, right? So we kind of like follow things through, right? We see this, we're going to follow it through here, we're going to follow it through here. I think there's another one here, right? So like rather than see the broken up little things here, we see it as an arrow, like we're following it left to right. So that is continuity. Okay. Another one is called connectedness or common fate, which is kind of we follow things going in the same direction. We're going to connect them and put them together. Then we've got closure. Oh, wait, I'm going to sneeze. Ah. Okay. This is another example of common fate, right? We kind of see these all as going in the same direction, even though they're not. Right? We all see them as having a common fate, a common like path they're taking. Same thing here, right? We all group these as going the same way. Okay. Then we've got closure. And this is the idea that despite we see that there's actually gaps in this, right? Like this white triangle doesn't have any border. We see that the one that's this triangle is kind of interrupted, but we still close it in and kind of see it as a meaningful thing. So despite this triangle being interrupted, we still see it as a triangle. Despite these circles being interrupted and we can't see the whole thing, we still close it in our minds and see it as a circle. Then we've got figure ground. And this is basically the idea that like in an image like this, there's a figure and then there's a ground, which is like the background. So we kind of automatically like pull out a figure, which is like the main thing to focus on, and then create an automatic background, right? There's always like the focus figure and then the background. So this image we see like it depends on what your figure ground is, but you're going to make, at least for me, I make the vase. My figure is what stands out and is like the main thing. And then my ground, my background is the black. Maybe for you guys it's different. Maybe the black is the figure and then the white is the ground. But it's kind of just automatically, however you see it, you're going to be pulling one thing out as the figure or the main character. And then the other thing's going to be the background. So, right, these are just all these kind of automatic things that our brain does to group things and perceive things as meaningful wholes rather than kind of a bunch of separate lines. We group things together. So it's more meaningful wholes rather than a bunch of different things kind of all sorted around without meaning. Okay, so next kind of perceptual cues we're going to look at have to do with depth perception. So if you are in an art class, you probably are familiar with this, so you're at an advantage here. So depth perception, we know, is our ability to perceive distance in objects, right? To see how far away something is from you. That is depth perception, to see how far away something is. And being able to perceive in 3 dimensions, right? You're looking at length, width, and depth. So we're specifically talking about depth here. So there are 2 types of cues. There's multiple within these, but there's 2 main types of overarching cues that we have to help us with depth perception. There's monocular cues, which use one eye, right? Mono, one. So monocular cues just only use one eye to see these. And then there's binocular cues to perceive depth, which, right, if something's bi, it means 2, so it means it uses both of your eyes. So we're going to go over the monocular cues first. There's more of them. So we have relative size. And again, these are all ways that we can perceive depth to see how far away something is from us and gauge that. So just kind of little tricks our brain uses to notice these things. So first is relative size. So basically if you have 2 things in your visual field, so this little panda one is a good example. If you have 2 things in your visual field, just naturally like the one that is larger looking is going to be closer to you. Right? If something's larger, it's most likely closer. If something's smaller, it's probably further back. So in this case, right, the bigger panda is the one that's actually closer to us. Relative height and visual field. So we perceive that objects that are higher in our field of vision are farther away, right? So we see here this tree is lower than this tree. So this tree is going to be on the left is going to be closer to us than this tree that's higher up. The higher up one is our depth cue. It's going to be further away. Then there's an important one. This was on the FRQ last year for them. It kind of was a curveball one. Then there's the cue of interposition. So interposition means to come between. So basically, if one object kind of blocks a little bit another object, then we know that the object that is blocking the one object is going to be closer. Right? So if I hold, that's bad. I pretend this is a Valentine's Day thing because it's red, but it's an ornament. So, right, if I have this little ball, and this is like this in front of my hand, we know the ball is closer than my hand to you guys in the camera, because right? It's blocking my hand. The fact that it is blocking my hand means it's in front of it, which means it's closer to you guys. So that's interposition. Linear perspective, this has to do with parallel lines, and this is a famous one that you'd use in art. I know my mom talks about this as an art teacher. So this is one, a great example is railroad tracks. So parallel lines, you're going to see, obviously, train tracks are always going to stay like this, but when we look at them visually head on, as they get further and farther away, they're going to look like they're converging further together. So we see here, if something's further away, then in terms of parallel lines, it's going to look like it is converging together. The closer you are to it, the more like parallel and straight and normal it's going to be. Light and shadow, I'm kind of partially blocking this one, but this makes sense in that if something's closer to the light, it means it's probably closer to you and it's going to be better illuminated and well lit. If something's more dimly lit, it's probably going to be further away. And then motion parallax, this is for movement. So think about when you're on a road trip or you're in the train or car, whatever. So when you're in motion, objects that are close to you seem to go by really fast, but objects that are further away appear to move more slowly. So this is a good example to think about, like as you're on a little road trip looking out the window, right? The signs on the side of the road go by super fast, but then if you're looking at like a farm in the distance or like the mountains, it looks like they're moving by really slowly because they're further away. So again, that's allowing us to gauge distance and depth and how far away we are from something. Okay, last two of these. So we have the binocular ones, right? So the ones I just talked about were monocular. They only use one eye. And then these depth perception cues are binocular cues that use both eyes. So one is called retinal disparity. So basically, by comparing images from the retinas in both of our eyes, the brain kind of computes how far apart two things are. So you can see here, right, the example here is if you go like this, you can see it kind of like when it gets kind of blurry here, you know that it's like getting closer and closer and closer. Obviously, when it's less blurry, it's further away. Convergence also is just this funny one here that our eyes move inward as objects become closer, right? You can even see a little bit as I'm doing it. But again, eyes are going to move inward as objects become closer, so you can kind of just see that movement. We're talking about then, last thing is ideas called perceptual constancy. So again, we're all talking about perception and how we're processing our visual images. So perceptual constancy is just the overarching term that humans, animals, whatever, we tend to see familiar objects as always having the same shape, size, color, etc., despite changes in things like lighting, distance, movement, whatever. So basically, despite when the scene changes, we still are able to determine that what we're looking at is the same thing as what we were previously looking at before stuff in its environment changed. So here's some examples that make this make sense. So shape constancy is the idea that objects have a constant shape despite potentially changing and moving. So, for example, if this door opens, we still perceive it as always going to be a rectangle, even though we see it's like, it doesn't look like that once it opens, right? So we perceive this to always be the same shape because we know it's a door. Despite when it moves, it doesn't look like that rectangle anymore. That's shape constancy. Another example is color constancy. So despite differences in lighting and how light or dark an environment is, you're still going to be able to know that something's the same color. So for example, right here it's light, here it's dark. It looks relatively like, it's different. You can tell it's different, but you're still able to tell, okay, this is a yellow banana, this is a green lime, this is like a reddish pepper thing, right? Um, so that's an example of color constancy. So despite changes in the lighting, we're still able to have that color and perceptual constancy and recognize that it's the same thing. So there you go. That's the main thing. And you guys are going to get to do your little scavenger hunt and look for some examples of these things on your own. All right. Have a nice day.